My hair's in focus, so it should be good. Should be GTG, as the kids are saying these days. Is that what the kids are saying? I don't know. Welcome to Camaraderie, a channel where I try to figure out old cameras and just generally explore the analog photography process. Today, May 15th, would be Richard Avedon's 97th birthday. So I thought it would be kind of fun to pay penance to this powerful portraitist. Penance. Is that pay penance? I feel like I'm using that word right. Yeah, penance is not the word I was looking for there, but it sounded good. I like the alliteration. Panegyric also works, but I feel better about saying penance. We've got a tribute to Richard Avedon today. There we go. So I've got a session set up to see if I can come even remotely close to achieving a portrait in the Avedon style. Portraiture is not my strong suit by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, I thought it would be a nice way to honor the man's memory and his legacy. First, I'll give you a quick rundown of Richard Avedon in case you're not familiar with his story or his work. Richard Avedon was born on May 15th, 1923 in New York, New York. His mother, Anna, came from a line of dress manufacturers, and his father, Jacob, ran a women's specialty clothing store in New York City on Fifth Avenue. So he definitely had plenty of exposure to the fashion world that he became so enveloped in as he grew in his career. Young Richard was shooting early on, using his family's Kodak box Brownie to shoot everything from his little sister to his father's mannequins in the store, and just dressed up in all their dressy dresses. He attended DeWitt Clinton High School in the Bronx, where he began to cultivate an interest in theater, poetry, editing, writing, and just the arts in general. It was there he would strike up a friendship with James Baldwin, who would go on to become one of America's most celebrated essayists, authors, playwrights, poets. You get the idea. During their time in high school, they worked together on a number of projects, but most notably their school's newspaper. And though they would eventually fall out, they remained on terms and would collaborate again throughout the rest of Richard Avedon's career until James Baldwin's death. Richard was named as Poet Laureate of New York City high schools in his senior year, and despite not actually graduating, enrolled in Columbia University to study philosophy and poetry, and then promptly dropped out to join the U.S. Merchant Marines as a photographer's mate second class, which I didn't even know was a thing. Basically, his job was to take pictures of soldiers for their ID cards. And he's quoted as saying, "I must have taken pictures of 100,000 faces before it occurred to me that I was becoming a photographer." I guess if you just start taking pictures of a bunch of people, yeah, like I said, it kind of does make you a photographer. After ending his stint in the Marines, Avedon studied under Alexei Brodovich. It was at Brodovich's design lab that he acquired a philosophy that would influence the rest of his career. It is the belief that editorial and commercial work shouldn't be tedious or mundane, but rather that it's the photographer's job to bring creative and fresh ideas no matter the subject matter, regardless of subject matter. He began shooting for the magazine Harper's Bazaar in 1945 under the suggestion of Brodovich. Shortly after which he started his own studio in 1946, which he maintained until he died. After 20 years with Harper's Bazaar having successfully blurred the lines between art and commercial photography, he quit after being criticized for involving models of color. So he joined Vogue, and then 20 plus years after that, he went on to become the first staff photographer for The New Yorker. All the while shooting individual projects, commissioned works, freelancing for the Rolling Stones, the list goes on. This dude was really productive his entire life. which is pretty cool. That's one of the reasons I look up to him. He remained with the New Yorker from 1992 until his death from a brain hemorrhage while on assignment for the New Yorker in 2004. It was during his time at Vogue where he created what many consider to be his magnum opus in the American West. It was a personal project that spanned 6 years, driving all around the American West. Surprise, surprise. And it was commissioned by the Amon Carter Center of American Art in Texas. Though already known for his arresting visual portrayals of persons of influence, celebrities, politicians, models, this is where he really started to turn his camera's focus from that high society to that of the largely downtrodden, the forgotten working class people of the West. Rather than glorifying the West and focusing on the grandeur of the natural landscape, as was the go-to standard for the last century before, he flipped the American ideals of hope and promise and work hard and you'll make it on its head. It's here where today's video really begins. In no way do I consider myself a portrait photographer. The medium, the art form as a whole has always just kind of bored me, if I'm being honest. But there's something about Richard Avedon's work that just transfixes me. It's kind of hard to describe. I don't know if you feel the same way that I do. It's more than a portrait. You know, it's kind of a reflection of the photographer in his subject that kind of turns it into a sort of fiction, if that makes any sense. Avedon himself said that my portraits are more about me than the people I photograph. And I think that there's a lot in that, a lot to unpack there. So as much as I can, I'm going to try and replicate the circumstances and the techniques that he used to create these most arresting of images. Now, I already have a feeling this could go a couple different ways. I either nail it just right off the bat and come to the conclusion that just anybody who has a camera and a white background and a person can create this just gripping portrait of a person. Or everything fails and I never want to do this again. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. So I don't have the kind of camera that Richard Avedon used for specifically his In the American West work. It was a 8x10 plate camera, you know, one of those really old-timey looking ones with the bellows and the big old tripod and everything. I do have a tripod, so that's good. I do have a white background, but I'm not using the same type of film he used, Kodak Tri-X. I've got just my standard Kent Mirror 400, and I'll be doing a fair bit of editing to these photos once they come out. And before you say anything, Richard Avedon and everybody else edited the crap out of his photos. So don't come at me with that stuff, man. That's a topic for another video, but just a heads up, I edit my pictures, I edit my negatives. You should too, unless you just don't want to, in which case that's fine. These purists out there, man, what do you think? Oh, no cropping, no adjusting. Seriously, man, read a book, do some research. All the greats do it, they did it. It's part of the photographic process. Rant aside, recruited one of my good friends to help me out with this project just so I have a model, because it can be kind of hard to just go out and find people these days. We'll see how it all turns out. done with the photo shoot, and man, I came out of it with even more respect for Richard Avedon than I already had. It went through 2 rolls of film and more or less got like 3 pictures that I am okay with. There was a lot of salvage work to do. Alright, so I finished the session and got everything developed, and as I was scanning them in, I started looking at the negatives and started to get real disheartened because it just didn't turn out quite how I was envisioning. There's a couple of key reasons for that. 1, I'm not Richard Avedon. 2, it was my first time doing anything like this, so obviously there's going to be a bit of a learning curve. Also, I was using equipment that I'm not used to working with. I was using a telephoto lens instead of my regular 50mm, so there was a bit of a learning curve with that. A lot of my negatives turned out a lot darker than I anticipated, just because I think I was more focused on interacting with my subject and, trying to get into the mindset of, how to capture something a bit more grand than just a standard headshot or snapshot or whatever. My mind was just not focused on making like double, triple, quadruple checking the shutter speed and aperture and everything. The sun kept coming out, and it was just a lot of exposure differences and everything that I was just not focused on. Focused. I love being able to use focus puns. It's great. Yeah, you see right here, a lot of them kind of turned out pretty meh. I don't know if it was a factor of using a different lens than I normally do, or if it was because it was not quite exposed properly or whatever, but I did find it kind of hard to nail that super crisp focus that is a major feature in a lot of Avedon's work. But I was able to salvage a couple of images that I think work out pretty well. And going back to the editing aspect of film, like I said, Richard Avedon and everybody else did it all the time. So I would get a negative like this, and yeah, like I said, I was pretty disappointed because it's not a super crispy focus. It's I wanted more action in the eyes with the magnification. I tried to make sure the tape was not in the frame, but you know what? That's not how you crop. That's why we have cropping available and level adjustments, and I was able to pop this background to that stark white. That was my intention all along, but I obviously need some more work on that just to be able to get that closer to this stark, crisp, absolute white from the get-go. Actually, I would prefer to get all this stuff right in camera, but that's why we have dark rooms, or, well, in this case, Lightroom. I was okay. I was pretty pleased with this one. This took me a while to get to this point where my subject and I were both collaborating and getting into the same mindset, and started to get something that has a little bit more to it. I think this is the standout portrait that I got. Despite this little line in here, I heard I think a little tiny piece of dust got caught somewhere in my film cassette. But honestly, it almost kind of adds to it. It adds a little something else, a little bit of an extra edge. And yeah, I don't know, this one speaks to me. Maybe it's because I know this guy pretty well, but to me there's something here, man. Yeah, it's more than just a regular snapshot, more than just a regular portrait to me. Now, starting at this point to explore the idea of trying to find my own self in this. And I won't go into all the details about like how we got to this point, but as we were talking, I saw this look and I was like, there's more there. There's more to it than just oh, let me take a picture of you, So, yeah. This one was just fun, just some, smoke effects or whatever. But in this one, I thought this was going to be the only good one, or semi-decent one that I had. And yeah, this one just kind of stood out to me. And just as, again, a further example of what kind of salvage job I had to do, again, it got a little dust specks and stuff, a little bit of scanning error right here. Background is basically just gray. Everything's kind of distracting and taking away from the central focus right here. When it comes to things like this, it's more about what you're trying to say or what you're trying to capture. It's not just representation. As Richard Avedon said, a portrait is not a likeness. The moment an emotion or fact is transformed into a photograph, it is no longer a fact but an opinion. There is no such thing as inaccuracy in a photograph. All photographs are accurate. None of them is the truth. And I think that is really where this kind of portraiture becomes more accessible, where it brings you in. It invites you to create your own fiction about this person, about yourself, about the interaction that you have with the image. What does this bring out in you? Does it bring out anything? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you're just like, dude, this guy's a schlock, whatever. And that's where this part of the video ends. I'll finish up with just kind of wrapping up my general thoughts on the process and things I wish I'd done differently or had known beforehand, and, what I got out of it. All right, so I'm really glad I did this project. It's always interesting to stretch my boundaries and stretch what I'm comfortable doing. And I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm comfortable doing this style of photography or portraiture in general, but I think it just goes to show that even if you get the right setup, if you get all the technical things right, or as right as you can, obviously I didn't have the big camera, or it wasn't just a random guy that I had never met before. Even if you get all of the things right, there's more to it than that. It's the soul of the photographer that comes into play there, the creativity, the style. It's more than just having all of the pieces together. Like, you could give any number of people the same set of Legos and tell them all to build a house, and they'll probably, even if they have the same sets of bricks, they're going to make different houses. So it kind of leaves me in awe of what Richard Avedon was able to accomplish, and it also is incredibly encouraging because it lets me know I feel like I'm on the right track with this, and it just makes me want to do this kind of thing even more and grow more as a photographer and as an editor and as a darkroom chemist. It's an intangible sort of thing that really gets to me. It's the pursuit of perfection, knowing that I'll never be there. I'll never get there. And I don't think you're supposed to. What is perfection anyways? I'm sure Avedon would agree. There's no such thing. I think most people agree. But it's that wanting to get better and wanting to better myself that's been so rewarding about this project. Things I would have done differently, I would have either used the lens that I'm used to or just taken the time to get to know that lens before I jumped into this project. I would have scouted out a different location so that I can make sure that I would have been in the shade. We were in the shade when we got to the location, and it was also overcast. But then, of course, as soon as we get everything set up, the sun starts breaking through the clouds and does all these weird shadow patterns and stuff across his face and his body. So I had to get the location manager's help to just hold a bouncer, reflector, blocker thing. I always never know what to call them because they can be so many things. Also, I would have liked to have had either Tri-X, Kodak Tri-X, which is what Richard Avedon used, or just any other sort of packaged film. That way I wouldn't take that risk of getting anything, little bits of dust in there that scratch the film. I don't know where those came from. I'm assuming it's from my reloadable cassettes because I've been using them for a while now. Otherwise, I would label, to me, it's a success. So, I mean, make of this video what you will, but I enjoyed myself, and I hope you guys learned something, and I hope you feel inspired to step out of your comfort zone and learn from whatever you're into. Find the masters and learn from it. It's an incredibly valuable and rewarding experience. So thank you for joining me on this little venture through time. Time? Well, I guess it has been a venture through time. We are time traveling creatures. Let me know if you have any suggestions for other photographers that you would like to see me try and imitate, pay homage to, whatever. I would like to make this a series, and I've got some people in mind that I'd like to, try to get a shot in their style. But let me know if you have any suggestions, and otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the other side of this little glass right here next time.